Today we'll start on the fifth and final part of the ethics. We'll cover the first 10 propositions. This material is actually quite straightforward. Spinoza is just exploring the consequences for practical life of the material in book 4. His aim is really quite modest. He just wants to show that an ethical system such as the one he's proposing, which excludes free will, which denies the existence of objective moral truths, and which is based on rational self-interest, that such an ethical system will lead to fairly well-established precepts for how to conduct ourselves in practical life. So he starts off with a lengthy wall of text, which is just a recapitulation of his differences with Descartes, primarily on the question of free will. He is, of course, taking issue with Descartes about Descartes' claim that we can determine our will with sure and firm decisions in the direction to which we wish our actions to tend, and associate the motions of the passions which we wish to acquire with the said decisions, we shall acquire an absolute dominion over our passions. So this is the claim of the Stoics and the claim of Descartes. Descartes being the only philosopher that Spinoza mentions by name in the Ethics. He had a great debt to Descartes, but also had very great divergences with him, which we saw going right back to the beginning of Book 3, which is essentially a dialogue with Descartes. And now he's just taking out all the stops. He's just making fun of Descartes for his ideas about how the mind supposedly governs the body by moving the pineal gland around. Such is the doctrine of this illustrious philosopher, insofar as I gather it from his own words. It is one which, had it been less ingenious, I could hardly believe to have proceeded from so great a man. And you see the tone. Indeed, I am lost in wonder that a philosopher, etc., etc. Of course, nobody defends Descartes anymore. He is fair game, and Spinoza was the first to challenge Cartesian dualism, Cartesian mind-body dualism, and Cartesian substance dualism generally. The idea that there is a material realm and an immaterial realm, a body and a mind that exist independently of each other. So I'm not going to linger on this. He concludes this tirade with just a statement to the effect that since the power of the mind, as I've shown above in Book 4, is defined by the understanding only, we shall determine solely by the knowledge of the mind the remedies against the emotions which I believe all have had experience of, but do not accurately observe or distinctly see, and from the same basis we shall deduce all those conclusions which have regard to the mind's blessedness. We'll see as Book 5 progresses more and more religious rhetoric coming in. There's no need to comment on it now. For the time being, his aims are quite modest, but bear in mind that the title of Book 5 is by no means modest. Its full title is Of Human Freedom, or Of the Power of the Understanding. So, as usual, he starts off with some axioms, no definitions in this case. The first axiom says that if two contrary actions be started in the same subject, a change must necessarily take place either in both or in one of the two and continue until they cease to be contrary. I'm not sure where he appeals to this, but I think the way to read this is to say that a conflict between two emotions, and Spinoza has given so many detailed accounts of how such a conflict can arise, a conflict between two emotions will eventually be resolved one way or the other, depending on the relative force of the emotions in question. The second axiom just says the power of an effect is defined by the power of its cause. This doesn't seem to me new, and I'm not sure what use he makes of it. He does appeal to it at one point in a proposition that we'll come to today. So turning now to the propositions, proposition 1, even as thoughts and the ideas of things are arranged and associated in the mind, so are the modifications of body or the images of things precisely in the same way arranged and associated in the body. So he's recapitulating his mind-body dual aspect monism. This, there's nothing much new here. He says that he cites proposition 7 in book 2, the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of things. The mind for Spinoza is God's idea of the body under this correspondence between ideas and things. But the ideas in the human mind are generally inadequate because we tend to organize our ideas according to what he calls the order of nature rather than the intellectual order. The order of nature just being the way we or our bodies are affected by other bodies. So he's not going to return to this this dual aspect monism for a while. Eventually, he's going to start talking about the eternity of the mind, and this we'll see also involves a notion of the eternity of the body. Because for Spinoza, all of the ideas in the mind are ideas of the body, but this is for later. It doesn't seem to have any pertinence to the propositions in the first half of Book 5. So moving on now to sort of practical advice for dealing with emotions. Proposition 2 says, if we remove a disturbance of the spirit or emotion from the thought of an external cause and unite it to other thoughts, then will the love or hatred towards that external cause and also the vacillations of spirit which arise from these emotions be destroyed. So remember, primary emotions such as love and hatred arise from the ideas that we have of external causes, causes external to ourselves. When we posit causes external to ourselves, Spinoza says that the mind is being passive. The mind is being active when it has adequate ideas. And to have an adequate idea of something is to be cognizant of the true cause of whatever it is under consideration. So the first precept that he offers is that we should, when we experience a passion, remove the thought of an external cause and replace it by what he calls true thoughts or adequate ideas, such as, for instance, the origin of the emotion is actually in the conatus, not in the circumstances external to ourselves. And the purpose of the emotion is simply to signal to us how well we are succeeding in preserving our being. So we see this phrase, removing the emotion from the thought of an external cause, reappearing a few times. So next proposition, an emotion which is a passion ceases to be a passion as soon as we form a clear and distinct idea thereof. So a clear and distinct idea, this is synonymous with an adequate idea, and emotions whose cognitive aspect consists of an adequate idea are what Spinoza called active emotions, as distinct from the passions. So the corollary just states that an emotion becomes more under our control and the mind is less passive in respect to it in proportion as it is more known to us. The greater our knowledge, the greater our potential for having adequate ideas. Proposition 4, there is no modification of the body whereof we can not form some clear and distinct conception. Remember, an emotion is a modification of the body which increases or decreases our power of activity, and it's the conception that we have of this process which determines whether the emotion is active or passive. So the corollary states, hence it follows that there is no emotion whereof we cannot form some clear and distinct conception. So now he has a scholium where he summarizes what the ground we've covered by saying that seeing that we clearly and distinctly understand whatever follows from an idea which in us is adequate, it follows that everyone has the power of clearly and distinctly understanding himself and his emotions, if not absolutely, at any rate in part, and consequently of bringing it about that he should become less subject to them. So he recommends that to attain this result, we should, as far as possible, acquire a clear and distinct knowledge of every emotion. Okay, so this is the point of Book 3. In order that the mind may thus, through emotion, be determined to think of those things which it clearly and distinctly perceives, okay, to associate the emotion with adequate ideas, true ideas, and wherein it fully acquiesces, and thus that the emotion itself may be separated from the thought of an external cause. And as a consequence of this, the desires which follow from the emotions, okay, will be incapable of being excessive. Remember that Spinoza says that any action to which we can be determined by a passive emotion, we can equally well be determined by an active emotion, depending on the degree to which the understanding is engaged. And when he says that desire is the actual essence of man, it's also implicit in that he recognizes that there is a process of education of desire in the course of human development. Our desires will be modified to the degree that we appreciate where our real self-interest lies. So he returns here to his favorite example. For instance, we've shown that human nature is so constituted that everyone desires his fellow men to live after his own fashion. In its guise as a passion, this is what he calls ambition, okay, where we are simply driven to seek the approval of others by this general mechanism of imitating or emulating the emotions of others. And in its guise as an active emotion, it's what he calls piety, where we seek to promote friendship. So he gives other examples, and we see again there's another scholium in a very similar vein following Proposition 10. So he just winds up by saying that then this remedy for the emotions, which consists in a true knowledge thereof, nothing more excellent being within our power can be devised. For the mind has no other power save that of thinking and of forming adequate ideas, as we have shown above. So, in a word, Spinoza is proposing that the remedy for the passions consists solely in understanding our emotions. Continuing then, Proposition 5, an emotion towards a thing which we conceive simply and not as necessary or as contingent or as possible is other things, other conditions being equal, greater than any other emotion. So to say what he means here by the word simply is explicated in the demonstration. To conceive a thing as free can be nothing else than to conceive it simply, while we are in ignorance of the causes whereby it has been determined to action. So we've seen this theme before. Okay, Spinoza has said in Book 3 that our reactive emotions, okay, our emotions which arise in us following the actions of other people or the misbehavior of other people, such as anger and resentment and so on. These are all the more intense if we believe that the perpetrator, the culprit, is acting freely, supposedly of his own free will. Similarly, the emotions, the self-conscious emotions such as repentance and regret and guilt are all the more painful if we mistakenly believe that we have free will, that we ourselves are not caught up in the universal causal determinism which Spinoza says rules overall. So we've seen in the propositions in Book 4 that Spinoza has also said that emotions towards things which we regard as necessary are stronger than those which we regard as contingent. Contingent or possible, meaning we're not sure. whether or not they will actually take place. For example, events in the future about which we speculate. Proposition 6 says that the mind has greater power over the emotions and is less subject thereto, insofar as it understands all things as necessary. This is critical for understanding Spinoza, and in the comments below, I'll give a reference to another video where I've seek to explain Spinoza's idea about necessity and determinism. For Spinoza, as we have seen many times, nothing in nature is contingent. Everything is determined by the necessity of the divine nature. So he reiterates this in the Scholium: the more this knowledge that things are necessary is applied to particular things which we conceive more distinctly and vividly, the greater is the power of the mind over the emotions, as experience also testifies. So he gives a couple of examples, such as a pain resulting from a loss of something is less hurtful if we understand that things could not have turned out otherwise. Proposition 7 states that emotions which are aroused or spring from reason, if we take account of time, are stronger than those which are attributable to particular objects that we regard as absent. I'll come back to this phrase, if we take account of time. The primary contrast that he's making here is between reason and the imagination. So whereas moralists have traditionally set up a dichotomy between reason and emotion, for Spinoza, the important axis is along, it has reason at one pole and imagination at the other. When we regard things as absent, we imagine them, such as we have hope and fear about events that are not in our present experience, but which we are speculating on with regard to the future. He also says, okay, he's appealing to his ideas about reason in book 2, where he characterizes reason as consisting of adequate knowledge of the properties of things, what he calls common notions, and logical deductions from these. And he's saying here that these common properties of things, by definition, are present whenever we contemplate anything using our powers of reason. Okay, so this, I believe, is what he means by this phrase. If we take account of time, if we are in the habit of using our power of reason and develop it, then the emotions which arise from reason will increase in strength. Proposition 8, an emotion is stronger in proportion to the number of simultaneous concurrent causes whereby it is aroused. He's not showing his hand at this point. I think that what's in the back of his mind here is the intellectual love of God. This emotion can be thought of as being caused by everything and anything. There is nothing that is inconsistent with it. It's not clear at this point what he's referring to. Proposition 9, an emotion which is attributable to many and diverse causes, which the mind regards as simultaneous to the emotion itself, is less hurtful, and we are less subject thereto and less affected towards each of its causes than if it were a different and equally powerful emotion attributable to fewer causes or a single cause. So I think he's just reiterating the same theme as in this proposition here, proposition 7, that the more the power of reason is cultivated, the greater the degree to which we can moderate our passions. What in the demonstration, what he's appealing to is his criterion for good and bad emotions. Remember, he said in book 4 that we know nothing to be certainly good except that which conduces to understanding. Okay, if we are contemplating several things at once, as in the statement of the proposition, then we are flexing our power of understanding. We are increasing our capacity for reason. And he reiterates this. The power of the mind consists solely in thought. The mind is less passive in respect to an emotion which causes it to think of several things at once. Okay, finally, proposition 10, so long as we are not assailed by emotions contrary to our nature, we have the power of arranging and associating the modifications of our body according to the intellectual order. So this contrast he's making here is between the intellectual order and the order of nature, where in one case, the ideas are governed by reason, and the other, the order of nature, where random associations of ideas and our experience of the way that we are affected by things organizes our thoughts. He says that so long as we are not assailed by emotions contrary to our nature, we have the power of arranging our ideas according to the intellectual order. And we've seen that he does recognize that our power, the conatus, is infinitely surpassed by the power of external forces. There's an intrinsic limitation in what we can hope to achieve in developing the conatus, our power of understanding. So the proof then just reiterates the familiar theme that emotions are bad only insofar as they impede our power of understanding. And finally, he wraps up this sequence with a scholium where he proposes to offer some fairly conventional practical advice about how to conduct ourselves. The best we can do, he says, so long as we do not possess a perfect knowledge of our emotions, is to frame a system of right conduct or fixed practical precepts committed to memory so that we can apply it forthwith to the particular circumstances in which we find ourselves, and so that our imagination may become fully imbued therewith. So the imagination here is referring to just the process by which ideas are associated with each other without being actually organized by the intellectual order. Imagination is a power. it's only a problem when we sort of let it run away with us. We don't realize the extent to which our lives is governed by it. So having this list of practical precepts to hand, we should often think over and reflect upon the wrongs generally committed by men and what manner and way they may best be warded off by high-mindedness. So we should have precepts to hand about the advantage and the good which follows from mutual friendships. We should realize the complete acquiescence that is the result of the right way of life. The reference here is to the proposition that says that self-approval can arise from reason, and the self-approval that does arise from reason is the highest possible. We'll see more about self-acquiescence later on in this book. Similarly, we should reflect on courage as a means of overcoming fear. We should also always bear in mind that which is good in every individual thing. Remember, he says that for every action to which we can be determined by a passion, we can also be determined by an active emotion. And then he returns to his favorite example about empty honor. I don't think we need to go over that one again. And he concludes by saying that he who would govern his emotions and appetites solely by the love of freedom strives, as far as he can, to gain a knowledge of the virtues and their causes, virtues being the active emotions, and to fill his spirit with the joy which arises from the true knowledge of them. Remember that for Spinoza, the passions are objects of scientific inquiry, okay, and the pleasure of understanding them is itself effective against the passions. He will in no wise desire to dwell in men's faults or to carp at his fellows or to revel in a false show of freedom. Again, we've seen that theme many times. Whosoever will diligently observe and practice these precepts, which indeed are not difficult, will verily, in a short space of time, be able, for the most part, to direct his actions according to the commandments of reason.